So the B'nai Israel or the African Israelite diaspora is what we will be dealing with today. Let me go back. African Israelite diaspora is what we're dealing with today. So when dealing with the African Israelite diaspora, it's key to bring up the traditions of that the Danite to establish Jews or Israelites in the Western Sahel and the Maghreb region in West Africa, period. This is coming from Archives Moroccains, page 71. And we're going to be reading from the highlighted section to the left. Of course, this is written in French, but I have the translation to the right. It reads, Eldad certainly visited certain Jewish tribes of or in the Sahara. He has heard many things said of certain others. He knows his uses and beliefs that to the point that Mr. Epstein has succeeded in identifying them with those of the Philashas whose common Hellenic origin with the ancient warriors of Caesarea had been supposed by us. It is also possible that he confused the Bene Musa with the powerful tribe of the Maasai, which he may have not visited himself. Since we have managed to identify most of the names of the Negro kingdoms with geographical regions of the Adrar region, of the French Mauritania, and even of Western Sudan. So when we're looking at Eldad's traditions and the locations that he went to, these authors were actually able to identify most of those territories and names with Negro kingdoms in the Adrar region, French Mauritania, and in the Western Sudan. So he was in West Africa, essentially. So I'm going to put emphasis on the Adrar region and Mauritania, because that's what we're going to be starting off with today. So going to the Negro land revisited, we're going to learn about the role of the Jews and the date of their arrival in the Western Sudan. All right. It is clearly outlined, or it clearly comes from Lee Chandler, who suggested that some of the inhabitants of southern Mauritania and the Western Sahel had either been Hebrews or Judaized Berbers before their conversion to Islam in the 11th century AD. Lee Chandler's suggestion was based on two arguments. And of course, I'm arguing that they had been Hebrews. The first was that the Sinhalese Moors or Muslims resembled the Jews of Palestine, and that these Moors favored typical Jewish names such as Ibrahim, Yaqub, Yosef, Isaac, and Miriam. All this pointed to their Hebraic ancestry. The second argument came from the 14th century Moroccan historian Ibn Abizar, who wrote that the Lamtuna chief Tarashna el-Lamtuni, who preceded the emergence of the Almoravid movement, had died in a holy war against Black Jews in southern Mauritania. Interesting. A similar claim appears in Mauritanian oral tradition. According to the Almoravid, Amir Abu Bakr B. Omar died in a fight against Black Jews whom he expelled from Adrar. This detail must have been transferred into tradition from the written Arabic sources. Ibn Zar's version of the Almoravid history seems to have been familiar to the nomads of the Sahara. All right, so we see here that it was Jews fighting in places like Adrar and Mauritania, which I said we're going to place emphasis on, against these Berber kingdoms or against this Berber force. So the question is, who exactly were these Black Jews of Mauritania Mauritania and Morocco? I believe these people to be the Bafour, the ancestors of the Saniki people. All right. I believe these people to be the Bafour, the ancestors of the Saniki people. In fact, the Golden Book tells us that the earliest inhabitants of the Western Sahara are African Black agriculturalists known as Bafour. They were subsequently replaced by the Berber. The latter still live in the Western Sahara. So these Bafour are the ancestors of the Saniki and Mandi people, and they also were known as the first inhabitants of the Western Sahara. So let's dig into these Bafour people. And to do that, we're going to go to Islam in West Africa, religion, society, and politics to the 1800s. And it reads, the idea represented in these accounts of the diligent Jewish cultivators who had introduced the digging of wells into an echo of oral traditions current in the Western Sahara. All over the Western Sahara, Arab and Nzaga-speaking tribes remember the Bafour among the old inhabitants of Adrar and Tangan, who were eliminated by the Sanhanja tribes. All right. So peep the I guess you can say peep the way I'm lining this out for you all right, we keep seeing that a drawer being named, that we keep seeing the Western Sahara and places like southern Mauritania being brought up. So just continue to digest what I'm bringing out, because it's all going to come together. But of course, it says that they were the original inhabitants of Adrar and Tangut, who were later eliminated by the Sahanja tribes or the Amavars. It says the Bafour were, according to some traditions, Jews from Wadi Nun, who introduced to the Western Sahara the digging of wells and the planting of palms. Other traditions claim that the Malims, the despised artisans of the Western Sahara, are descendants of the Bafour and are referred to as Yahuds because they had been Jews. As early as the 12th century, Al-Idrisis knew about the ancient inhabitants of the Western Sahara, which she called Kumnuria, who had been uprooted and scattered by the Sanhanja. All right, the same people are the Bafour. Al-Idrisis adds, according to what the merchant relate, the people of the country of Kumnuria claim that they are Jews. The persistence of these traditions from the 12th to the 15th centuries makes it more difficult to dismiss this or them as mere legends of no historical value. Perhaps one might relate the vague traditions about Jews in the Western Sahara with more detailed traditions about the existence of flourishing Jewish communities in Drar and other parts of southern Morocco. So we keep saying that these people were from places specifically like Drar and Tangut. All right, this is in Mauritania. Right, this is in Mauritania. And we also learned that these people were Jews from Wadi Nun, which is also a place or in the Drar region of Morocco. So these Bafour people who gave rise to the Mandi Saniki people were originally in places like Morocco and Mauritania. Now, give me 1 second. I'm going to take myself off the screen real quick because I believe my PowerPoint is in a mode where it's timed, where I was practicing earlier or going over this earlier. So I believe it's still in rehearsal mode. So let me take this out because it keeps skipping while I'm reading. So give me 1 second to try to figure this out. And if I can't, then we're just going to go through it regardless. All right, so I believe I have it. So let me go back to it. And we're going to continue going. I hope you all are enjoying this thus far. And thank you all for tuning in. Shalom, Brother Lion Farm, and shalom, Brother Isaiah. So continuing on, it goes on to say, specifically right here in the second paragraph, it reads off, in Mauritania, according to Arab sources and certain oral traditions of the Western Africa, the first inhabitants of Western Africa were the Bafour, whose Jewish origin is enigmatic and controversial. All right, so again, I laid out the foundation, showing you the traditions of Jews in the Western Sahara, showing you that the Bafour were the first inhabitants of the Western Sahara, and showing you how they have connections to Jews. Now, let's wrap this all together in a bow. Following a process of organization, functioning, and decline of all Sudanese empires described by Charles Martel, one might assume that the Bafour Empire existed several centuries before Islam. These Bafour seem to have introduced the cultivation of palm trees, horse breeding, new irrigation methods, and metallurgy. According to tradition, reported by Andre J. Lucas, the Bafour were the first ones to plant palm trees and to dig deep and large wells. The Mu'almin, or craftsmen, make and have always made works of art. They are called Yahud because, according to legend, only Jews in Mauritania were craftsmen. And you know that the Mu'almin have neither homeland nor tribe. All right, so we see that these people are referred to Yahuds because they are craftsmen, or specifically Malim or Mu'almin. All right, this is the name of their caste system. Something else to take into account, which is very, very interesting, is that that they introduce horse breeding, new irrigation methods, the cultivation of palm trees, as well as metallurgy. Sounds a lot like, other related Bantu populations. So again, these people were known as Yahuds or blacksmiths or Malam. All right, this is all synonymous for their specific metalsmith or blacksmith class amongst the Bafour. So let's get into the blacksmiths. Malam, or a variant of it in both Hebrew and Arabic terminology and usage, is an honorific designating not only a political elite, but also a scholar, a literate person, a fine craftsperson, the master of craft, or the head of a workshop. Mu'almin, an obvious variant, is used by the metalsmiths attached to the nomadic clans and lineages that traverse Mauritania. Their leatherworking wives are addressed as Mu'almima. According to oral traditions, their heritage is associated with the historical obscure enigmatic Bafour. It goes on to say again, the Malams descend from the Bafour. It is they who taught the autochthonous Berbers ironworking. They were Jews of race, all right? It is they who taught the autochthonous Berbers ironworking. They were Jews of race. And we know that the Berbers have been in North Africa, or specifically Morocco, for a while, especially with a lot of them descending from the Ibero-Maurusians. And these Bafours would have came in and taught these people ironworking. The Malams have always made works of art. One calls them Yehud because after legend, only the Jews in Mauritania were artisans. So again, this is country traditions. This is country legend. This is Mauritanian legend, that these people were Jews because only artisans were Jews, only blacksmiths were Jews, and these people were associated with these castes. Shalom, sister. Thank you for tuning in. So not only do we see these people being associated with blacksmith and Yehud, Jewish caste, we see them making Jewish types of artwork as well, which is very interesting. It says, until recently, the piece of jewelry most favored by Jewish women throughout North Africa was the triangular fibula, created by meticulous soldering minute rings together in a filigree-derived technology, often with attached triangular wings. Classically, such fibulae were used in Paris to fasten the draped costume worn by North African Phoenician and Roman women during the 1st century CE. And recently, a number of gold pieces very similar in design, also using filigree techniques, were unearthed in an 11th century crochet of jewelry from Africa, which is in present-day Tunisia. Sometimes inscribed with a seal of Solomon, sometimes with Hebrew, Arabic, or Judeo-Arabic script, often framing floral motifs. They came uniquely from the hands of the Jewish Malams. All right, remember, who are the Malams? These are the Bafour. So they came from the hands of the Jewish Malams in the traditional Jewish jewelry centers of southwest Morocco and the Jebel Armor in Algeria, both regions of reputed Bafour origin. So these Bafour people, ancestors of the Mende, ancestors of the Saniki people, they actually made a Judeo-Arabic type of jewelry. And here's actually a picture of that jewelry. As we read in the source, it said that they had some types of jewelry inscripted with the seal of Solomon, as we see here. And again, this was worn by women. We see the floral motifs right here in this specific jewelry. All right. And right here, we see the Judeo-Arabic script in this jewelry. All right. Hebrew and Arabic script in this jewelry. So this is coming from the hands of these Bafour of Mauritania and Morocco. All right. And looking at the comment section, the sister, she just made a comment that is true. Talking about the Hausa in northern Nigeria. If you go read this source right here, Judaic Threads, it makes mention to the Hausa Muslims being referenced as this as well. So, sister, if you go look at Judaic Threads in West African tapestry, it actually talks about what you just stated as well. So I do not disagree with what you just said. But again, here's the jewelry being associated with these Bafour Mulams, who are reputed to be of Jewish origin. So although these Bafour were originally in places like Mauritania and also southern Morocco, they ended up making their way here to Senegal. So let's read about that. Going back to the Black Jews of Africa, we're going to read about that where it says that Al-Idrisi's testimony informs us that the Bafour spread out in the west of Mauritania on the Atlantic coast when they were persecuted by the Almoravids. All right, and this is the same people known as the Sanhaja. To this important Bafour dispersion of the Judaized blacks of Adrar and Tangan, one must add that the Bafour fraction that lives on fish on the coast. All right. So they were dispersed from Adrar and Tangan, and guess what? They were known as the Judaized blacks. So where were they dispersed to? According to Charles Montel, the repression first by the Almoravids, then more pronouncedly in the 16th century, pushed a part of the Judaized Bafour to the south of the Senegal River, where they are thought to have merged with the Wolof populations and were named CB Baor, Badapalul, or Badapalul. The oral traditions that present the fishermen of Mauritanian coast, let me read that again. The oral traditions that presents the fishermen of the Mauritanian coast, the Irigumen, the Shingala, and the Ulid Amid bin Diamond, as descendants of the ancient Bafour, corroborates Al-Idris's account, and observers noted that they concealed their Jewish origin. Now, although the Bafour themselves were persecuted and pushed southward into Senegal, they left descending tribes. So they left tribes that I guess you can say will be related to them, such as the Immergruen, the Shingala, and the Ulid Amid bin Diamond in southern Mauritania, and they also concealed their Jewish origin. So let's continue on. It goes on to say that scholars, or this is coming from Judaic Threads in West African Tapestry, No More Forever. It says scholars who have addressed the enigmatic Bafour attribute their presence in the Adrar region or area of Mauritania to migrations from the city of Silamassa in the southeast Morocco, the regions of the Jebel, Nefusa in Tunisia, and the Mozab of Algeria. Each of these areas inhabited by large coexisting assembly of Ibadite and Jewish traders who maintained an intense commercial relation across the Sahara, as well as by concentration of Jewish artisans under puritanical Ibadite protection. All right. It goes on to say, oral tradition also credits the Bafour with the founding of the city of Odan or Wadan in the Adrar region. So let's look at the Senegalese traditions of these Bafour coming into Senegal. So according to Senegalese traditions, they recorded in the last century also claimed that the CB Bafour were Jews, initially forced south by the Almoravids in the 11th century and further south by the Hassaniya in the 16th century, who settled among the Wolof populations, where they are still designated as CB Baor. Another set of locally recorded indigenous traditions noted that the Bafour were Jews of Oid Noon in southwest Morocco, who had descended into the Adrar region with other Berber tribes and were eventually integrated into the nomadic clans traversing the Trezor region in Mauritania. Some of the nomadic Trezor families consider themselves descendants. Other accounts credit the Bafour with the introduction of irrigation and the construction of stone-lined wells with intensive subterranean galleries, building technologies involving masonry, carpentry, and metalworking skills, all attributed to the Bani Israel. All right, so that's what we're really here for. All right, we're here to see how these people connect to the Bani Israel, and we just showed it. All right, all the traditions that these people have connect them to the Bani Israel, and once we get to the end of this, I'm going to wrap it up and show how all these tribes I'm about to bring out connect to this people known as the Bani Israel. So, other accounts credit the Bafour with the introduction of irrigation and the construction of stone-lined wells with extensive subterranean galleries, building technologies involving masonry, carpentry, and metalworking skills, all attributed to the Bani Israel. Another thing I want you all to remember is that we read that the Bafour were the first to plant palm trees in the Western Sahara. If we look at Psalms 92 verses 12, it reads, "The righteous shall flourish like the palm tree, shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Those that be planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of Yah. They shall bring forth fruit in old age. They shall be fat and flourishing, to show that the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no unrighteous in him. Why did I bring this verse out? I brought this verse out to just show that there is indeed a tradition of palm trees amongst the ancient Israelites. Not only that, to the right here, we have a Roman coin showing palm trees in the land of Israel. So why is this important? Why is this palm tree connection important? I will tell you why. And we're going to go to the genomes of ancient date palm trees germinated from 2,000-year-old seeds to find out why. Specifically because the type of palm trees we find in West Africa are the same type of palm trees that we find in the land of Israel. It reads, we applied this resurrection genome approach to date palms, which represents one of the best examples of successful germination of ancient seeds. Date palms, which is the name of the palm tree, are a domesticated fruit crop species that are the iconic perennial plant of the arid lands of West Asia and North Africa. So let's read about the cultivation of it real quick. From there, dates presumably spread westward and were widely cultivated in Egypt from at least the from at least the mid-second millennium BCE, and further west to the Maghreb at least by the first millennium BCE. So these specific palm trees, date palm trees, were said to have reached the Maghreb, like Morocco and Mauritania, both locations that we know the Bafour were in around the first millennium BCE. It says the southern Levant is situated at the crossroads of Asia, Africa, and Europe, and during the 11th century BC, this area saw the rise of an ancient geopolitical entity of Judea. Date palms grown in antiquity around Jericho and along the Dead Sea in Judea were referred to as Judean date palms. By the 19th century, however, no trace of the Judean date palms remained, as date palms agriculture was extinguished in the area. Although Judean palms are believed to be extinct, it is unclear if some of their descendants still live among modern date plant varieties. And what we come to find out is these specific Judean date trees made their way into West Africa and are proposing by way of the Bafour. It says in the Nile Valley, date palms were present as early as the pre-dynastic period, 5,000 years ago, but were not extensively cultivated in Egypt until at least the New Kingdom 3,500 years ago. But when we're dealing with the Bafour in the further west, date palm remains are dated to about 8,400 to 4,400 years ago in Libya, but are not found in the Sahara Maghreb area until much later. All right. Again, so we see these date palm trees start to pop up in the Maghreb, specifically as it said on this page in the first millennium BC. And this also lines up with the time we would start to see the Bafour come in. And we're going to line it up in a few slides with the oral traditions of their descendants. And here we see the North African specific Phoenix dactylifer and the West Asian Phoenix dactylifer, which is, I guess you can say, the scientific name of the date palm tree. And remember, the Bafour, according to some traditions, were Jews from Wadi Nun who taught the planting of palm trees to the Western Sahara. And again, here's a distribution of these date palms in the Sahel region of Africa, specifically in these places like Mauritania and even Senegal, where we know the Bafour were and where it's said that they cultivated palm trees.